Marcus Bennett stood frozen in his kitchen, staring at a piece of paper that would destroy everything he'd ever known. The elderly man's hands trembled as he read the words again, hoping his 82-year-old eyes were failing him. But the numbers were clear, brutal in their simplicity. 0% genetic match. 0% genetic match. 0% genetic match. 0% genetic match. For children. 4 zeros. Marcus had spent 60 years believing in the family he'd built. A family he thought was bound by blood, sacrifice, and unconditional love. He'd served 2 tours overseas, defending freedoms for people he'd never meet, while trusting that his own home remained sacred. He'd worked double shifts at the factory, his back aching and hands calloused, to provide for children who carried what he thought was his legacy. Every scraped knee he'd bandaged, every school play he'd attended, every proud moment watching them grow, all of it now felt like watching someone else's life. The DNA test had been Angela's idea. His youngest daughter, always the thoughtful one, had given it to him for his 82nd birthday 3 months ago. "Let's discover our roots, Daddy," she'd said, her eyes bright with excitement. "See where the Bennett strength comes from." Bennett strength. The phrase now tasted like ash in his mouth. Marcus lowered himself into a chair, the report still clutched in his weathered hands. Outside, the neighborhood continued its evening routine. Dogs barking, children playing, the distant hum of traffic. Normal sounds for a world that had just stopped making sense. His mind raced backward through decades of memories, searching for signs he'd missed. Had there been whispers? Knowing glances? How many people had pitied the fool who didn't know his own house was built on lies? The front door opened, and his wife Claire's voice called out cheerfully. "Marcus? I'm home. Brought your favorite pie from." She stopped when she saw him. 20 years of marriage had taught her to read his silences. "What's wrong?" Claire asked, setting down her bags, her voice shifting from light to cautious. Marcus couldn't speak. He simply slid the paper across the table. Claire picked it up, her eyes scanning the document. The color drained from her face as comprehension dawned. For a moment, neither spoke. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, each second stretching into eternity. "Marcus, I can explain," she began, but her voice cracked. "Explain." The word came out hollow. "Explain how 4 children, 4 are mine. Explain how you've let me live a lie for 60 years. Claire's hand shook as she set the paper down. "Those tests, they make mistakes sometimes. You can't just... Don't." Marcus's voice cut through the air like steel. "Don't insult me more than you already have. Look at those numbers, Claire. Look at them." Tears began streaming down Claire's face, but Marcus felt nothing. The man who'd always been quick to comfort her, to hold her when she cried, now sat like stone. "It was so long ago," Claire whispered. "You were gone so much, Marcus. The war, the overtime, you were never here. So you replaced me?" Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You replaced me 4 times over, and let me believe they were mine. They are yours. You raised them. You love them. Built on lies." His voice cracked with emotion he'd been holding back. "Every birthday, every graduation, every moment I looked at them with pride. It was all based on a lie you fed me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his voice eerily calm. "I want names." Claire's eyes widened. "What?" "The fathers. I want to know who they are." "Marcus, please, what good would?" "Names, Claire." His tone left no room for negotiation. Claire sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking with sobs. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Jerome. Jerome Patterson is Malcolm's father." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Jerome Patterson. They'd grown up together, served in the same unit overseas. Jerome had been his closest friend, the best man at their wedding. The man who'd stood beside Marcus and promised to always have his back. And the others? Marcus demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. But before you hear the rest of this devastating revelation, if stories like this, stories that expose painful truths and remind us that nothing is ever quite what it seems, resonate with you, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and join the Witness Wall community. Because here, we bear witness to the stories that need to be told. Every voice deserves to be remembered. Claire's confession came in fragments, each name another dagger to Marcus's heart. Victoria. Thomas Wright is her father. He was the deacon at church. You were deployed that year, gone for 18 months straight. Thomas Wright, the man who'd counseled them through rough patches in their marriage. The man Marcus had trusted with his family's spiritual well-being while he was overseas fighting for his country. Isaiah. Claire's voice became even smaller. I honestly don't know. It was during that time, when you were working nights and weekends. There was a man at the grocery store where I worked. We talked, and one thing led to another. I never even knew his last name. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. His second son, Isaiah, the boy who'd followed him everywhere as a child, who'd wanted to be just like his daddy. His father was some nameless stranger. And Angela, Marcus could barely form the words. Angela, his baby girl, the one who'd given him this cursed test. Claire buried her face in her hands. David Chun. He was my supervisor at the hospital. It only happened once, Marcus. Just once. You were dealing with your mother's illness. Barely spoke to me for months. So every time life got hard, you found someone else? Marcus's laugh was bitter. Every time I was doing what I had to do, protecting this country, providing for this family, you were destroying it. I was lonely. Claire's voice rose in desperation. Do you know what it's like? Raising children alone, sleeping in an empty bed night after night, having no one to talk to. Millions of military spouses do it without betraying their families. Marcus shot back. You think you were the only one who was lonely? I was in a desert halfway across the world, wondering if I'd ever see home again. And you know what kept me going? The thought of you. The thought of our family. Our family, Claire. The word hung between them. Poison now. Claire reached for him, but Marcus stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. Marcus, please. I need you to leave. This is my house, too. I don't care. His voice was cold, final. Pack a bag. Go to your sister's. Go to a hotel. Go wherever you want. But I can't look at you right now. Claire stood there, tears streaming down her face. But Marcus had turned away. He heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway, heard drawers opening and closing, heard the front door close with a soft click. Only then did Marcus allow himself to break. He collapsed into his chair, and for the first time in 6 decades, Marcus Bennett, decorated veteran, pillar of his community, the man everyone called unshakable, wept like a child. 3 days passed in agonizing silence. Marcus moved through his house like a ghost, unable to eat, unable to sleep. Every photograph on the wall mocked him. Every memory felt tainted. He called in sick to his part-time job at the community center, something he'd never done in 15 years. His phone buzzed constantly. Claire had told the children there was a situation, and now they were all calling, worried, confused. Marcus couldn't bring himself to answer. How do you tell your children, grown adults with families of their own, that their entire existence is built on deception? On the fourth morning, Malcolm showed up at the door. At 58, Malcolm was the oldest, a successful attorney with a commanding presence that reminded Marcus of himself. Or at least, reminded him of the man he thought he'd passed his traits to. Dad, what's going on? Mom won't tell us anything. Just keeps crying. She's staying at Aunt Diane's place. Marcus stood in the doorway, unable to meet his son's eyes. Come in. They sat in the living room, where Marcus had played with Malcolm as a baby, where he'd taught him to tie his shoes, where they'd celebrated his law school acceptance. Every corner held a memory that now felt like a lie. Dad, you're scaring me. What happened? Marcus pulled out the DNA report. His hands had stopped shaking. Now they just felt numb. Read this. Malcolm took the paper, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. Marcus watched his face, watched confusion turn to shock, shock turn to disbelief. This has to be wrong, Malcolm stammered. These tests, they're not always accurate. It's not wrong. Dad, listen to me. I'm a lawyer. I've seen cases where these tests were contaminated or... Your mother confirmed it. The words came out flat, emotionless. Your father is Jerome Patterson. The name landed like a physical blow. Malcolm knew Jerome, Uncle Jerome, as they'd all called him. The man who'd been at every family barbecue, every holiday gathering. The man who'd slipped Malcolm money for his first car, who'd celebrated his wedding. No, Malcolm stood abruptly. No, that's impossible. I wish it was. Malcolm paced the room, his breathing rapid. Uncle Jerome? Mom and Uncle Jerome? When? How? Does it matter? Marcus asked quietly. The when and how don't change the what. Of course it matters. Malcolm's voice cracked. You're telling me my entire life is a lie. That the man I called uncle is actually... He couldn't finish the sentence. Your biological father. Marcus completed for him. Malcolm sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. What about Victoria? Isaiah? Angela? Different fathers. All of them. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Malcolm looked up, his eyes red. You're still my father. Biology doesn't change that. You raised us, loved us. On a foundation of lies. Marcus interrupted. Every moment, every memory, it's all poisoned now, Malcolm. Don't you understand? When I looked at you, I saw my legacy, my bloodline. I saw proof that I'd done something right in this world. But it was never real. It was real to me. Malcolm's voice rose. You taught me to ride a bike. You sat through every one of my boring school concerts. You were there when I passed the bar exam. That was all real, Dad. Marcus finally met his son's eyes. Was it, or was I just playing a role in someone else's story? Stop it, Malcolm pleaded. You're my father in every way that matters. Except the one way that's supposed to matter most. Malcolm stood again, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I need to talk to Mom. I need to hear this from her. She's not denying it. I still need to hear it. And then I need to talk to Jerome. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest at the mention of that name. What are you going to say to him? I don't know yet, Malcolm admitted. But he owes us answers. He owes you answers. After Malcolm left, Marcus sat alone in the gathering darkness. Jerome Patterson, his best friend, his brother in arms, the man who'd saved his life in combat, who he'd trusted with everything. The betrayal from Claire had been devastating. But this was something else entirely. This was a violation so profound that Marcus could feel something dangerous awakening inside him. Something he'd learned to control during his years in the military. Something he'd locked away. Rage. Victoria Bennett Morrison was in the middle of leading a board meeting when her phone buzzed for the 15th time. As the executive director of a nonprofit organization, She was used to juggling multiple crises, but the persistent calls from her siblings were unusual. During a brief break, she finally checked her messages. Malcolm's text was simple but chilling. Family emergency. Need you at Dad's house. Tonight. Don't bring the kids. 3 hours later, Victoria stood on her childhood home's porch. Her stomach knotted with dread. Through the window, she could see Malcolm and Isaiah inside, their faces grim. Angela's car was already in the driveway. When Marcus opened the door, Victoria barely recognized him. Her father had always been the picture of strength, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to see right through any problem. But the man before her now looked hollow, aged a decade in mere days. "Daddy." Her voice came out small, childlike. "Come in, Vicky. Your brothers and sister are already here." The four siblings sat together on the couch they'd fought over as children, while Marcus stood before them, like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. In his hand was a document Victoria couldn't quite make out. "I'm only going to say this once," Marcus began, his voice devoid of emotion. 3 months ago, Angela gave me a DNA ancestry test for my birthday. The results came back last week." He paused, and Victoria felt her heart hammering. Whatever was coming, it was bad. "According to this test, none of you are biologically mine." The words seemed to suck all the air from the room. Victoria felt the world tilt. "What?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "Mom had affairs," Malcolm said bluntly, his face hard. "Multiple affairs. Each of us has a different biological father." "No." Victoria shook her head. "No, that's not possible. Mom would never. She already admitted it." Isaiah cut in, his voice tight. "I spoke with her this morning." Victoria looked at Angela, who sat silent, tears streaming down her face. Of all of them, Angela had always been closest to their mother, had always defended her when the boys complained she was too strict or too traditional. "Who?" Victoria asked, turning back to Marcus. Who's my biological father?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Thomas Wright." The name hit Victoria like a punch to the stomach. "Pastor Wright? The man who baptized me? Who counseled me and David before we got married?" "The same." Victoria felt nausea rising. She thought of all the times Pastor Wright had been in their home, all the church picnics and prayer meetings. She thought of how he'd always had a soft spot for her, how he'd paid for her college textbooks when money was tight, how he'd walked her down the aisle when Marcus had been recovering from hip surgery. "Oh God," she breathed. He knew. All these years, he knew and never said anything. They all knew. Malcolm said bitterly. Mom, Jerome, Pastor Wright, they all knew and let Dad believe a lie. Isaiah, who'd been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. "At least you know who yours is." "Apparently. Mine is some random guy from a grocery store. I don't even have a name." The pain in his voice was raw. Victoria reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Don't," Isaiah said sharply. "Don't try to make this okay. Nothing about this is okay." "Daddy," Angela finally spoke, her voice breaking. "What do we do now?" Marcus looked at his youngest daughter, the child who'd inadvertently shattered their family with a gift meant to bring them closer. "I don't know, baby girl. I honestly don't know." The Bennett family had always prided themselves on being close-knit, the kind of family that gathered for Sunday dinners and celebrated every milestone together. But in the 2 weeks following the revelation, that foundation crumbled. Victoria stopped going to church. The thought of seeing Pastor Wright, of sitting in pews where he'd preached about honesty and integrity while hiding such a massive secret, made her physically ill. Her husband David tried to be supportive, but even he seemed unsure how to navigate this crisis. Malcolm threw himself into research, approaching the situation like a legal case. He ordered his own DNA test, then convinced his siblings to do the same. We need to confirm this, he insisted. We need to make sure these results are accurate before we blow up our entire lives. But deep down, he already knew the truth. The test results came back identical to Marcus's. 0% match across the board. Isaiah spiraled in a different direction. The knowledge that his biological father was unknown, that he was the product of what his mother called a mistake with someone whose name I never learned, ate at him. He started missing work, stopped returning calls from his wife and children. His siblings watched helplessly as he seemed to disappear into himself. Angela, consumed by guilt over giving Marcus the test that revealed everything, moved back into her childhood home. She couldn't bear the thought of her father alone in that house, surrounded by memories turned lies. But living there came with its own torture. Every photograph on the wall, every family memento, now felt like evidence of crime. Meanwhile, Claire remained at her sister Diane's apartment, trapped in a purgatory of her own making. Her children's calls came sporadically, conversations stilted and painful. Malcolm was coldly professional, treating her like a witness he was deposing. Victoria could barely speak to her without crying. Isaiah wouldn't take her calls at all. Only Angela still came to visit, though even those meetings were strained. I never meant to hurt anyone, Claire told Angela during one of these visits, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Your father, he was gone so much. I was so young, so lonely. I made mistakes. Mistakes. Angela's voice was gentle but firm. Mama, this wasn't like forget and pay a bill. You let Daddy raise children that weren't his. You let him believe his whole life. I gave him a family. Claire's voice rose. Those children love him. He loves them. That's real, Angela. That's not a lie. But it is, Angela said softly. It's all built on a lie, Mama. And now we're all drowning in it. Jerome Patterson lived 15 minutes from Marcus, in a modest ranch house he'd bought after retiring from the post office. For weeks, he'd sensed something was wrong. Claire wasn't at book club. Marcus hadn't shown up for their usual Thursday dominoes game. He'd called several times, left messages, but received no response. Then Malcolm showed up at his door. Jerome opened it with a smile that died when he saw Malcolm's expression. Hey there, counselor. What brings you? We need to talk. Malcolm's voice was ice. Can I come in? Jerome stepped aside, confusion and worry creeping into his features. They sat in the living room, surrounded by photographs of Jerome's own family, his late wife, his 3 daughters, grandchildren. Malcolm stared at those photos with an expression Jerome couldn't quite read. Is something wrong with your father? Jerome asked. I haven't heard from Marcus in weeks. My father. Malcolm let the words hang in the air. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. See, we recently did some DNA testing. Family Ancestry Project. Jerome's face went carefully neutral. That's so. Yeah. Results came back interesting. Turns out Marcus isn't biologically related to any of us. Not me. Not Victoria. Not Isaiah. Not Angela. The color drained from Jerome's face. The thing is, Malcolm continued, his voice deadly calm. My mother confessed, told us who our biological fathers are. And you know what she said about me? Jerome stood abruptly. Malcolm, listen. She said you're my father. Malcolm stood too, his hands clenched at his sides. You, the man I called uncle my whole life. The man who was Dad's best friend. You slept with his wife, and then played happy family at our barbecues for 60 years. It wasn't like that, Jerome said desperately. It was one time, one moment of weakness. Marcus was overseas, Claire was struggling, and one time resulted in me. Malcolm's voice cracked. One moment of weakness gave you a son you never acknowledged. Did you know? All these years, did you know I was yours? Jerome's silence was answer enough. My God, Malcolm breathed. You knew. You looked me in the face at my high school graduation, at my wedding, when my own children were born, and you knew. I wanted to tell you, Jerome said, tears forming in his eyes. So many times, I wanted to tell Marcus, tell you, but what? It was easier to keep lying, easier to pretend to be the faithful friend while you betrayed him in the worst possible way. I've hated myself for it every single day. Jerome's voice broke. Do you think I don't know what I did? Do you think I don't see Marcus in you and feel sick with guilt? Good, Malcolm said coldly. I hope that guilt eats you alive. Because right now, my father, my real father, the man who raised me, is destroyed. And it's because of people like you. Malcolm headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. Stay away from us. Stay away from Dad. If I see you anywhere near our family, I don't know what I'll do. After Malcolm left, Jerome sat in his empty house, staring at the photographs on his walls. In many of them, Marcus stood beside him, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling. Brothers in arms. Best friends. All the lie. Jerome picked up his phone and dialed Marcus's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Marcus's voice, strong and familiar, asked him to leave a message. Marcus, Jerome said, his voice shaking. It's me. Malcolm came by. He told me you know. Brother, I'm so sorry. I've been sorry every day for 60 years. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know you probably never want to hear from me again, but I had to tell you. What I did, there's no excuse. You deserve better. You deserve the truth. I'm sorry I never gave it to you. He hung up and sat in the darkness, waiting for a call that would never come. Pastor Thomas Wright had led Riverside Community Church for 43 years. He'd baptized 3 generations of families, married countless couples, and buried beloved members of his congregation. At 79, he was preparing for retirement, planning to hand over his pulpit to a younger minister and spend his remaining years in quiet reflection. Then Victoria appeared in his church office on a Tuesday morning. Pastor Wright, she said formally, standing in his doorway. Do you have a few minutes? Of course, Vicky. He smiled warmly, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Always time for you. How's David? The children? Victoria didn't sit. Instead, she closed the door behind her and stood before his desk, her arms crossed. I need you to answer a question honestly, she said. And before you do, I want you to know that I already have the answer. I'm giving you one chance to tell me the truth. The warmth faded from Pastor Wright's face. What's this about? Am I your daughter? The question hung in the air between them. Victoria watched as shock, then guilt, then fear passed across the pastor's face. Victoria, I don't lie to me. Not here, not in this church where you've preached about truth and integrity my entire life. Am I your daughter? Pastor Wright's shoulders sagged. He suddenly looked every one of his 79 years. Yes. The confession, though expected, still hit Victoria like a hammer. How could you? It was one night, Pastor Wright said quietly. Your mother came to me for counseling. Marcus had been deployed for over a year. She was struggling, lonely, questioning her faith. I was going through my own crisis. My wife had just been diagnosed with cancer. We both needed comfort, and in a moment of profound weakness, you betrayed Dad, Victoria finished. You betrayed your wife. You betrayed your calling. Yes. His voice was barely a whisper. I've lived with that guilt every single day. Did your wife know? No. She died believing I'd been faithful. And me? Victoria's voice shook. All those times you paid for my books, walked me down the aisle, gave me advice, was that guilt or fatherly love? Pastor Wright looked up at her, tears streaming down his weathered face. It was both. I knew I could never acknowledge you as my daughter, never tell the truth, but I could be there for you in small ways. I convinced myself that was enough. It wasn't enough, Victoria said. Nothing could ever be enough to make this right. You stood at that pulpit week after week, preaching about honesty and righteousness while living a lie. How many sermons did you give about the sanctity of marriage while knowing you destroyed my father's? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Victoria's voice rose. My father is destroyed. My family is shattered. And you get to retire peacefully, with everyone thinking you're this pillar of faith and morality. Pastor Wright stood, his hands trembling. What do you want from me, Victoria? I want you to resign. I want you to tell the congregation why. I want them to know exactly who they've been following all these years. The church. The church deserves the truth. All those people who trusted you, who came to you with their problems, their sins, they deserve to know you're no better than any of them. Worse, even, because you pretended to be. Please, Pastor Wright begged, don't do this. The scandal would destroy the church, destroy everything I've built. You mean everything you built on lies? Victoria's laugh was bitter. You're more worried about your legacy than the lives you ruined? She moved toward the door, then stopped. You have 1 week. Either you tell them, or I will. Victoria walked out of the office, through the sanctuary where she'd been baptized and married, and out into the bright sunlight. Behind her, she heard Pastor Wright collapse into his chair, sobbing. She felt no satisfaction in his pain, only emptiness. Word spread through the community like wildfire. In a town where everyone knew everyone, secrets this explosive couldn't stay contained. The DNA revelation, the affairs, the betrayals, it all came out in fragments through whispers at the grocery store, conversations at the hair salon, murmurs after Sunday service. The Bennett family became the subject of gossip and speculation. Some people expressed sympathy for Marcus, seeing him as a victim. Others whispered that he must have known, must have turned a blind eye. A few even suggested Claire had been justified, implying Marcus's military service and long work hours had driven her to it. For Marcus, these whispers were torture. He stopped going to the community center, stopped attending church, stopped answering his door. Angela worried he wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping. When she managed to convince him to see a doctor, his blood pressure was dangerously high. Dad, you have to take care of yourself, she pleaded. This stress is killing you. Maybe that would be better, Marcus said quietly, staring out the window. Maybe that would be easier than living with this. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. But Angela could see the darkness consuming her father. The man who'd always been so strong, so unshakable, was crumbling before her eyes. Malcolm tried a different approach, suggesting therapy. Dad, you need to talk to someone professional, someone who can help you process this. Process what? Marcus asked bitterly. The fact that I spent 60 years as a fool, that everyone in this town knew my wife was unfaithful while I was overseas fighting for her country, that the people I trusted most betrayed me in ways I never imagined. Not everyone knew. Enough people did. I see in their eyes now, Malcolm. The pity. The judgment. I'm not the respected veteran anymore. I'm the stupid old man who didn't know his own children weren't his. Victoria tried reaching out to their mother, hoping Claire might be able to say something, anything that could help. But Claire was drowning in her own guilt and shame, barely functional at her sister's apartment. I never wanted this, Claire told Victoria. I know you don't believe me, but I never wanted to hurt your father. He was a good man, a good provider, but he was never there. Vicky, do you know how lonely it was? Then you should have left him, Victoria said harshly. You should have been honest instead of building a family on lies. I loved him. I still love him. Those children, You kids, you were real. That family was real. No, Mama, it was a fantasy. And now we're all paying the price for it. Meanwhile, Isaiah's investigation into his own biological father had hit dead ends. The grocery store where Claire had worked was long closed. Claire couldn't remember the man's name, could barely remember what he looked like. It was so long ago, she kept saying. I was so young, so stupid. The not knowing ate at Isaiah. His siblings at least had names, faces, people to direct their anger toward. He had nothing but questions that would never be answered. Maybe it's better. His wife tried to console him. Maybe not knowing is easier than knowing it was someone who could look you in the face and lie. But Isaiah disagreed. Not knowing felt like floating in space, unanchored. At least his siblings had solid ground to stand on, even if that ground was made of betrayal. It was a humid Thursday evening in late summer when everything came to a head. Jerome Patterson, unable to bear the silence from Marcus any longer, decided to go to the Bennett house. He needed to apologize in person, to look his former best friend in the eye and beg for forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. He arrived at dusk, parking in the driveway behind Angela's car. Through the window, he could see Marcus sitting in his recliner, staring at nothing. The sight of his old friend, so hollow and broken, made Jerome's chest ache. He knocked. Angela answered, her face hardening when she saw who it was. You need to leave, she said firmly. Please, Angela. I just need 5 minutes with your father. You've done enough. Angela, who is it? Marcus's voice called from inside. Before Angela could respond, Marcus appeared behind her. When he saw Jerome, something flickered in his eyes. Pain, rage, something else Angela couldn't identify. Dad, I'll tell him to leave, she began. No, Marcus said quietly. Let him in. Dad, are you sure? Let him in, Angela. Reluctantly, Angela stepped aside. Jerome entered slowly, like a man walking into a courtroom for sentencing. Angela positioned herself in the doorway to the kitchen, ready to intervene if needed. The two men stood facing each other, 60 years of friendship between them, now rotted to nothing. Say what you came to say, Marcus told Jerome. Marcus, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, truly sorry. What I did to you, to your family, there's no excuse. I've carried the guilt every day, but I know that doesn't make it right. You saved my life in Vietnam, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. Remember that? You pulled me out of that burning Jeep. I would have died if not for you. I remember. I told Claire about it when I got home. Told her you were a hero, a true friend. She already knew you from the neighborhood, but after that, I made sure you were part of our family, part of our lives. Jerome's head dropped. Marcus. And while I was still overseas, still recovering from injuries I got in that Jeep, you were sleeping with my wife. Marcus's voice remained steady, but Angela could see his hand shaking. The woman who was supposed to be faithful to me while I fought for our country. I know, and Did you think about me? Marcus interrupted. When you were with her, did you think about the man whose life you'd saved? The man who trusted you? Every second, Jerome whispered. I thought about it every second, and I hated myself, but you did it anyway. Marcus stepped closer. And then you looked me in the face for 60 years and pretended to be my friend. You came to my home, ate at my table, held my son, your son, and never said a word. I wanted to tell you so many times. Then why didn't you? The calm in Marcus's voice finally cracked. Why did you let me live a lie? Why did you let me pour my heart and soul into children that weren't mine while their real fathers watched from the shadows? Because I'm a coward, Jerome said, tears streaming down his face. Because I was afraid of losing you, losing everything. Because I told myself that maybe it was better not to know, that maybe the love you had for those children was more important than biology. That wasn't your choice to make. Marcus roared, and Angela jumped. You don't get to decide what I know about my own life. You don't get to steal my truth. You're right, Jerome sobbed. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry, brother. I'm so sorry. Don't call me that, Marcus said coldly. You're not my brother. You never were. The two men stood there, the weight of decades crushing them both. Finally, Jerome turned toward the door. I'll go, he said quietly. But Marcus, for what it's worth, watching you be a father all these years, even to a child that was biologically mine, I saw a real love. The kind I never could have given. That was real. That mattered. Get out of my house. Jerome left without another word. Angela watched him walk to his car, shoulders shaking with sobs. When she turned back, Marcus was standing in the middle of the living room, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into fists. Daddy, are you okay? Angela asked softly. Marcus didn't answer. He walked to the mantel where family photos stood in neat rows. Malcolm's graduation, Victoria's wedding, Isaiah's military promotion, Angela's baby shower. With one sweep of his arm, he sent them all crashing to the floor, glass shattering across the hardwood. Dad! Angela rushed forward, but Marcus held up a hand to stop her. I'm fine, he said, though clearly he wasn't. I need to be alone. I'm not leaving you like this. Angela, please. His voice broke. I need to be alone. Reluctantly, Angela gathered her purse. I'm calling Malcolm, and I'm coming back in the morning. After she left, Marcus stood among the broken frames and shattered glass. 60 years of memories lay at his feet, each one now poisoned by the truth. He thought about Jerome's words. That was real, that mattered, and wanted to believe them. But how could love built on lies ever be real? He walked to his bedroom and opened the closet, reaching past clothes to the locked box he kept on the top shelf. Inside was his service weapon, cleaned and maintained despite decades of disuse. Marcus had always been a man of discipline, of rules and order. Even in his darkest moments overseas, he'd never broken. But rules and order had gotten him nowhere. Discipline and honor had made him a fool. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, the weight of the gun familiar in his hand. How easy it would be to end this pain. One pull of the trigger and all the humiliation, all the betrayal, all the questions would stop. But then he thought of Angela's face when she'd found him. Thought of Malcolm trying to be strong, of Victoria's righteous anger, of Isaiah's desperate search for identity. They didn't deserve more trauma. Whatever else was true, he'd raised them. They called him Dad. That had to mean something. Marcus put the gun back in its box and locked it away. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, a different kind of darkness began to take root. Not the darkness of despair, but the darkness of rage. The following week, Pastor Wright announced his immediate retirement to a shocked congregation. He didn't give details, simply said that personal circumstances required him to step down. But Victoria had made good on her promise. She told several church leaders the truth, and word spread quickly. Within days, the congregation was in turmoil. Some members defended Pastor Wright, insisting that past sins shouldn't define a lifetime of service. Others felt betrayed, their faith shaken by the revelation that their spiritual leader had been living a double life. Pastor Wright's family faced the worst of it. His 3 legitimate daughters, Victoria's half-sisters, though none of them knew it yet, were devastated by the whispers and accusations. His grandchildren faced bullying at school. The scandal that Victoria had wanted became a reality, but it brought her no peace. I thought exposing him would make me feel better, Victoria confessed to her husband one night. I thought justice would heal something, but I just feel empty. David held her as she cried. Revenge never heals, baby. It just creates more wounds. Meanwhile, Malcolm had become obsessed with uncovering every detail of his mother's affairs. He'd hired a private investigator, was looking into old records, trying to piece together a timeline. His wife begged him to stop, to let it go, but Malcolm couldn't. "Don't you understand?" he told her. "My entire identity is based on a lie. I need to know the truth. All of it." "Why?" she challenged. "What will it change? You're still the same man you were before you knew." Malcolm Bennett, good father, successful attorney, loving husband. How does knowing the details of your mother's past change any of that? But Malcolm couldn't hear her. The need for answers consumed him. Isaiah took a different path. Unable to find his biological father, he'd started attending support groups for adoptees and donor-conceived children. People who understood the unique pain of not knowing your genetic origins. There, he found others who shared his questions, his anger, his grief. "The not knowing is its own kind of death," he told the group one evening. "It's like there's this hole in me that can never be filled. Every time I look in the mirror, I see a stranger. Every time my kids ask about their heritage, I have nothing to tell them." A woman named Patricia, who'd been searching for her biological father for 20 years, squeezed his hand. "The hole doesn't go away," she said gently, "but you learn to live with it. You learn that who you are isn't just about DNA. It's about the choices you make, the life you build." Isaiah wanted to believe her, but the hole still ached. Marcus became a ghost in his own life. He went through the motions, eating when Angela forced him to, showering, dressing, but there was no light behind his eyes. His children watched helplessly as he seemed to fade away, becoming a hollow shell of the man he'd once been. But beneath that hollow exterior, something was forming. A plan. A terrible, calculated plan. It started with research. Marcus spent hours online, reading about similar cases, about men who discovered late in life that they'd been deceived. Some had committed suicide. Some had simply walked away from their families. And some had taken a different path. Marcus thought about Jerome, living comfortably in retirement, his guilt apparently manageable enough to allow him to sleep at night. He thought about Pastor Wright, who'd resigned but faced no real consequences, who'd lived 79 comfortable years while Marcus suffered. He thought about Claire, who destroyed everything and still wanted forgiveness, still wanted understanding. And he thought about the unnamed man who'd fathered Isaiah, the grocery store worker who'd used Claire and walked away, never knowing or caring about the child he'd created. That man was beyond Marcus's reach, but the others weren't. The rational part of Marcus knew what he was contemplating was wrong, knew it would destroy what little remained of his family. But the rational part was growing quieter each day, drowned out by rage and pain that had nowhere else to go. He started with Jerome. Marcus began parking outside Jerome's house at night, watching the lights go on and off, memorizing his routine. Jerome lived alone since his wife's death 5 years ago, his daughters visiting only on weekends. Marcus knew Jerome's schedule. Thursday night was poker with friends. Sunday morning was church. Tuesday afternoons he volunteered at the VA center. The same VA center where Marcus used to volunteer before shame drove him away. Then Marcus researched Pastor Wright. The old minister had moved in with one of his daughters after the scandal, but he still took a daily walk through the park near the church. Same route, same time, every single day. Creatures of habit, the elderly. Marcus was one himself. He didn't plan details. That felt too premeditated, too cold. He just gathered information, prepared himself for something. He didn't know what yet. Or maybe he did, and couldn't admit it even to himself. Angela noticed the change in her father's demeanor. He was calmer, more focused. At first, she thought he was finally accepting the situation, moving toward healing. but there was something about his stillness that unnerved her. "Dad seems better," she told Malcolm one evening. "Better how?" Malcolm asked, distracted by the documents spread across his desk. "I don't know. Quieter. More at peace, maybe." Malcolm looked up, frowning. "Dad's not at peace, Angela. Nobody could be at peace with this." "Then what is he?" Malcolm didn't have an answer, but the question nagged at him. That night, he drove to his father's house. He found Marcus in the garage, cleaning and organizing with an intensity that seemed excessive. "Dad, what are you doing?" Marcus looked up, and Malcolm saw something in his father's eyes that made his blood run cold. It wasn't peace. It was resolution. "Just putting things in order," Marcus said calmly. "A man should keep his affairs organized." "Affairs?" "Dad, that's an odd way to put it." "Is it?" Marcus returned to his sorting, methodically arranging tools by size. "I think it's time I handled some unfinished business." "What kind of business?" "The kind that's been left undone too long." Malcolm moved closer, trying to read his father's expression. "Dad, you're scaring me. What are you planning?" "Planning?" Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm 82 years old, son. I don't have time for long-term plans. But I do believe in settling accounts before it's too late." "Settling accounts," Malcolm repeated slowly. "With who?" Marcus didn't answer. He just continued organizing, each tool placed with deliberate precision, while Malcolm watched and worried. It was Claire who first sensed the real danger. Despite everything, she still knew Marcus better than anyone. When she heard from Diane that Marcus had been asking questions about Jerome's schedule and pastor rights routines, alarm bells went off. She called Malcolm immediately. "You need to check on your father." "I was just there yesterday, Mom." "He's fine." "No, he's not." Claire's voice shook. "I know that tone, that calmness." "Malcolm, I lived with your father through 2 wars and 40 years of marriage. When he gets that quiet, when he starts organizing and planning with that kind of focus." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he's dangerous. To himself or others, I don't know. But that's not peace you're seeing. That's a man preparing for battle." Malcolm wanted to dismiss her concerns as paranoia or guilt, but he couldn't shake his own unease from the night before. He called Victoria and Isaiah, and that evening all 3 siblings returned to their father's house. They found him on the porch, sitting in his rocking chair with a glass of sweet tea, watching the sunset. He looked almost serene. "Well, this is a surprise," Marcus said as they approached. "All 3 of you together. Did someone die?" "Dad, we're worried about you," Victoria said, sitting beside him. "We want to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." "That's what concerns us," Malcolm admitted. "You were devastated, broken, and now suddenly you're better than fine. That doesn't make sense." Marcus took a sip of his tea, considering his words. "You know what the hardest part of all this has been? Not the betrayal itself, but the helplessness. The feeling that everything was done to me and I had no power, no control. But I've realized something. I do have power. I do have choices." "What kind of choices?" Isaiah asked carefully. "The kind that matter." Marcus set down his glass and looked at each of his children in turn. "I spent my whole life following rules, doing the right thing, being honorable. And where did it get me? Used. Betrayed. Made a fool. Dad. But I'm not powerless," Marcus continued. "And I'm tired of being the victim in this story. Maybe it's time I became something else." The siblings exchanged worried glances. Victoria leaned forward, taking her father's hand. "Daddy, whatever you're thinking of doing, please don't. It won't fix anything. It'll only make things worse. Worse than having your entire life revealed as a lie." Marcus asked quietly. "Worse than knowing the people you trusted most betrayed you in ways you can't even fully comprehend? How could it possibly get worse? You could end up in prison, Malcolm said bluntly. Or dead. And we'd lose you completely, not just emotionally, but physically. Is that what you want? To leave us with nothing? For the first time, Marcus's calm facade cracked. You act like you have something to lose. But don't you understand? I already lost everything. The moment I opened that DNA report, everything I thought I knew, everything I believed, it all disappeared. We're still here, Angela said, tears streaming down her face. We still love you. We still need you. Doesn't that count for anything? Marcus looked at his youngest daughter, and his expression softened. It counts for everything, baby girl. But it doesn't erase the past. It doesn't make the pain go away. Then let us help you, Victoria pleaded. Let us find a therapist, someone you can talk to. Let us help you work through this the right way. The right way, Marcus repeated with a bitter laugh. I've been doing things the right way my whole life. Maybe it's time for the wrong way. Despite their intervention, the siblings couldn't watch Marcus every moment. He was a grown man, a veteran who knew how to evade surveillance. And he was determined. 3 nights later, Jerome Patterson came home from his Thursday poker game to find Marcus sitting on his porch steps. Marcus! Jerome's voice was cautious, fearful. What are you doing here? Waiting for you. Marcus stood slowly, his tall frame blocking the porch light. We need to finish our conversation. I don't think it's a good idea. Malcolm told me to stay away. Malcolm doesn't control me. Marcus interrupted. Nobody controls me anymore. That's what I've realized. For 60 years, I let other people make decisions about my life. Claire decided to lie to me. You decided to betray me. Pastor Wright decided his guilt was manageable. Everyone made choices except me. Well, now it's my turn. Jerome took a step back. Marcus, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Do you know what it's like, Jerome? To look at your son, except he's not your son. He's yours. And see your own face staring back? To realize that every time I felt pride in Malcolm's strength, his character, I was really just admiring your genetics. That's not true. You raised him. You shaped who he became. Did I? Or was it always there in his blood, waiting to come out? I'll never know now, will I? You stole that certainty from me. Jerome's hand moved toward his phone in his pocket, but Marcus saw the gesture. Don't, Marcus said quietly. Don't call anyone. Not yet. You owe me this conversation at least. You owe me the truth, all of it. No more running. No more hiding behind apologies. Jerome's hand froze. What do you want to know? Everything. When it started, how many times, what she said about me, what he said about me. Every detail you've been keeping locked away for 60 years. Marcus, tell me. The roar echoed through the quiet neighborhood, lights flickering on in nearby houses. And so Jerome told him about the first time, when Marcus had been deployed for 14 months, and Claire had come to Jerome crying, lonely, desperate for human connection. About how Jerome, dealing with his own failing marriage, had found comfort in her arms. About how they'd promised it would never happen again, and how it hadn't, but the damage was already done. When Claire got pregnant, Jerome said, his voice shaking, she wasn't sure at first. The timing, it could have been yours. She wanted it to be yours. We both did. But you knew better. I suspected. And as Malcolm grew, as he started looking more and more like me, I knew for certain. But what was I supposed to do? Destroy your family? Destroy my own? So you chose to protect yourself? Marcus said coldly. You chose your comfort over my truth. I chose to let you have your family. Jerome shouted back, his fear turning to defensive anger. Would knowing have made anything better? Would it have made you love Malcolm less? Would it have made the last 60 years worth erasing? That wasn't your choice to make. The two men stood facing each other, decades of history between them, now twisted into hatred. Marcus's hand went to his pocket, and Jerome saw the outline of something heavy there. "Marcus," Jerome said carefully, "please, think about what you're doing. Think about Malcolm, about your other kids. They need you." "They're not my kids," Marcus said flatly. "That's the point. They're yours and Pastor Wright's and some strangers. Everyone's children except mine. That's the pain talking. No, that's the truth talking. Finally, the truth you should have told me 60 years ago." Marcus pulled his hand from his pocket, and Jerome flinched. But it wasn't a gun. It was a photograph. Old, faded, creased from being carried, and looked at too many times. It showed Marcus and Jerome in their military uniforms, arms around each other, grinning at the camera. Young, innocent, brothers. "This is what you destroyed," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Not just my marriage, not just my sense of fatherhood. You destroyed this. You destroyed us." Jerome stared at the photograph, tears streaming down his face. "I know. I've known every day since." Marcus let the photo fall from his hands, fluttering to the ground between them. "Knowing isn't enough. Being sorry isn't enough. There's no punishment sufficient for what you did to me." "Then what do you want?" Jerome asked desperately. "Tell me what I can do to make this right." Marcus looked at his former friend for a long moment. "Nothing," he finally said. "There's nothing you can do. That's what makes this so unbearable." He turned and walked away, leaving Jerome standing on his porch, the photograph at his feet, neighbors peering curiously from their windows. But the darkness in Marcus hadn't dissipated. If anything, the conversation had fed it, because Jerome was right about one terrible thing. There was no punishment sufficient, no action that could balance the scales. And that realization was more dangerous than any plan for revenge. When a man believes nothing can make things right, he becomes capable of anything. The Bennett siblings knew they were running out of time. After neighbors reported Marcus's confrontation with Jerome, Malcolm called an emergency family meeting, this time including Claire, despite the protests. They gathered at Malcolm's house, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Claire sat apart from everyone, a pariah in what was once her family. Marcus hadn't been invited. This meeting was about him, not with him. "He's going to do something," Victoria said without preamble. "The question is what, and can we stop him?" "We could have him committed," Malcolm suggested. "Involuntary psychiatric hold. He's clearly a danger to himself or others." "You want to have your father locked up?" Claire asked, her voice sharp with accusation. "Haven't you done enough to him?" "We've done enough." Isaiah's voice was dangerous. "You got some nerve, Ma. None of this would be happening if you'd been faithful, if you'd been honest." "Don't you dare," Claire shot back. "I made mistakes, yes, but I also gave you life. I raised you. I loved you. Or does that count for nothing now?" "It counts," Angela said quietly, "but it doesn't erase what you did to Dad. And right now, Dad is the one we need to worry about." "I know him," Claire insisted, "better than any of you. He won't hurt himself. He's too disciplined, too proud. But will he hurt someone else?" Malcolm asked. The question hung in the air. None of them wanted to believe their father, decorated veteran, respected community member, the man who'd taught them right from wrong, was capable of violence. But they'd also never seen him like this, never seen the light go out of his eyes this way. "We need to talk to Jerome and Pastor Wright," Victoria decided. "Warn them to be careful, maybe suggest they stay with family for a while." "Pastor Wright already left town," Isaiah revealed. "Moved in with his daughter in Atlanta. Got spooked after Dad showed up at his house last week." Dad went to Pastor Wright's house. Malcolm's voice rose. "When? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because nothing happened," Angela explained. "Dad just stood there, looking at him. Didn't say a word. Pastor Wright said it was the silence that terrified him more than any threat. Malcolm ran his hands over his face. This is escalating. We need to do something now. Like what? Claire challenged. You can't watch him 24 hours a day. You can't control him. Marcus has always been his own man. Then maybe you need to talk to him, Victoria suggested reluctantly. Maybe if you explained, really explained, why you did what you did. You think I haven't tried? Claire's voice cracked. You think I haven't called, texted, begged for a chance to talk? He won't even acknowledge I exist. And honestly, can you blame him? For the first time since the revelation, the siblings saw their mother not as the villain of their story, but as a human being drowning in regret. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it complicated the narrative in ways that made everything harder. What about his therapist? Angela asked. The one I finally convinced him to see. Can we talk to her? Confidentiality, Malcolm reminded her. She can't tell us anything unless Dad's in imminent danger to himself or others. And is he? No one had an answer. The meeting ended without resolution, each family member returning home with the weight of helplessness on their shoulders. They couldn't fix the past. They couldn't heal their father's pain. All they could do was watch and wait and hope they could prevent whatever was coming. But hope, they were learning, was a fragile thing. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary day that would later seem grotesque in its normalcy. Marcus woke early, made his coffee, read the newspaper. He showered, dressed in his best suit, the one he'd worn to Malcolm's wedding, to Victoria's doctoral ceremony, to every important occasion. He wanted to look respectable, dignified, like the man he used to be. He drove to Jerome's house, knowing Jerome would be home, knowing, too, that Jerome's daughters wouldn't visit until the weekend. The neighborhood was quiet, people at work or school. Perfect. Jerome answered the door, and his face went pale when he saw Marcus standing there in his suit. Marcus, I wasn't expecting you. No, Marcus agreed. I suppose you weren't. Look, if this is about the other night, Can I come in? Jerome hesitated, then stepped aside. What else could he do? Refuse and prove he was afraid? Call the police and escalate a situation that might be peaceful? They sat in Jerome's living room, surrounded by photographs of his legitimate family. Marcus stared at a picture of Jerome's grandson, a boy who looked remarkably like Malcolm had at that age. Genes are funny things, Marcus said conversationally, the way they carry forward through generations. That boy there, he has your nose. Malcolm has your nose. Malcolm's son has it too. My grandson, except he's not my grandson, is he? He's yours all the way down. Marcus, please. I've been thinking. Marcus continued, still calm, still measured. About legacy. About what we leave behind. You have a legacy, Jerome. 3 daughters who love you. Grandchildren who carry your blood. Your face will echo through generations. So does yours, Jerome said desperately. Through the children you raised. Do you know what my actual legacy is? Marcus interrupted. It's being the fool. The veteran who fought for his country while his wife and friends betrayed him. That's what people will remember. That's what my grandchildren's grandchildren will whisper about when they come across my name in family stories. That's the one who didn't know. That's not true. Yes, it is. Marcus stood, and Jerome instinctively moved back. And I've decided I'm not going to let that be the end of my story. What are you going to do? Marcus reached into his jacket, and Jerome's eyes widened with fear. But what Marcus pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a folder. He dropped it on the coffee table. Open it. With shaking hands, Jerome opened the folder. Inside were documents, legal documents, DNA tests, affidavits, paternity acknowledgments. I'm officially disowning Malcolm, Marcus said, and Victoria, Isaiah, and Angela. As of today, they are no longer my children, legally or otherwise. Malcolm is being named as your son. The others similarly. Marcus, you can't. I can, and I have. The lawyers finalized everything this morning. You wanted your son? You've got him. All the legal and financial responsibilities that come with fatherhood. Congratulations. Jerome stared at the documents in horror. This will destroy Malcolm. It'll destroy all of them. No, Marcus said. It'll give them the truth. Complete, undeniable truth. They'll finally have to accept that I'm not their father. That I never was. You raised them. That makes you their father more than any DNA test. Then you should have told me that 60 years ago. Marcus's calm finally shattered. You should have given me the choice. Instead, you stole 60 years of my life, made me invest everything I had into children who weren't mine, and now you want me to just accept it? To pretend biology doesn't matter. It doesn't. Yes, it does. Marcus moved closer, his face inches from Jerome's. It matters because it was a choice you took from me. Maybe I would have stayed. Maybe I would have loved them anyway. But I deserve the chance to decide. You stole that from me. Jerome was openly crying now. So what happens now? You just walk away from them. Leave them with nothing. I'm leaving them with the truth, Marcus said. And I'm leaving them with you. Their real fathers can step up now. Can finally do the job they should have been doing all along. He moved toward the door, then stopped. You know what the real tragedy is? If you'd told me back then, if you'd all been honest, I might have forgiven you. The betrayal was 60 years ago, but you made me live a lie every single day since then. That's 60 years of betrayal, Jerome. One for every year you stayed silent. Marcus left, leaving Jerome sitting in his living room, surrounded by legal documents that would destroy what remained of the Bennett family. But Marcus wasn't finished. He drove to Atlanta, to the address he'd gotten for Pastor Wright. It took him 4 hours, time he spent thinking about all the sermons he'd sat through, all the prayers the pastor had offered for his family, all lies, delivered from a pulpit by a man who'd violated everything he claimed to believe. Pastor Wright answered the door himself, and the color drained from his face. "Mr. Bennett," he said carefully, "this isn't a good time. It's never a good time for truth, is it, Pastor?" Marcus pushed past him into the house. "That's why you've avoided it for so long." Pastor Wright's daughter emerged from the kitchen. "Dad, who is it?" "It's fine, Catherine," Pastor Wright said. "Mr. Bennett and I need to have a private conversation." Actually, Marcus said, Catherine should hear this too. No, Pastor Wright tried to object, but Marcus was already speaking. "Did you know your father is also Victoria Bennett's father? That while your mother was dying of cancer, he was sleeping with my wife?" Catherine's face went white. "What? It's not. We shouldn't discuss this now," Pastor Wright stammered. "When should we discuss it?" Marcus demanded. "After another 60 years of lies. Catherine deserves to know she has a sister. Victoria deserves to know she has siblings. Everyone deserves the truth." Marcus pulled out another folder. He'd come prepared and handed it to Catherine. "DNA results. Paternity test. All the proof you need. Your father, the great Pastor Thomas Wright, has been living a double life." Catherine took the folder with shaking hands, looking between Marcus and her father. "Dad, is this true?" Pastor Wright sank into a chair, his face in his hands. "Yes." The word, simple and final, seemed to break something in Catherine. "How could you? Mom was dying, and you." "I'm sorry," Pastor Wright whispered. "I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this." Catherine shouted, and Marcus felt a grim satisfaction that someone else finally understood his pain. He left them there, father and daughter in their own crisis, and drove back home. For hours to think about what he'd done, what he'd set in motion. By the time Marcus reached his house, the sun was setting. His phone had 73 missed calls from Malcolm, Victoria, Isaiah, Angela, even Claire. News traveled fast. He didn't answer any of them. Instead, Marcus sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. Beautiful despite everything. The world kept turning, kept being beautiful, even when individual lives fell apart. His phone rang again. This time, it was Angela. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something in him softened at the thought of his baby girl. "Hello, Angela." "Daddy." Her voice was thick with tears. "Daddy, what have you done?" "Well, I should have done the moment I learned the truth," Marcus said calmly. "I set the record straight. You disowned us. You legally severed all ties. How could you do that? How could I keep living a lie?" Marcus countered. "Angela, I love you. I love all of you. But that love was based on false pretenses. Everything was. So you're just throwing us away?" Angela sobbed. 60 years of being our father, and you're just done?" "I'm not your father," Marcus said, each word cutting him even as he spoke them. "That's the point. I never was." "You are," Angela screamed. "Biology doesn't change what we've been to each other. It doesn't erase every moment, every memory. It taints them," Marcus interrupted quietly. "Every single one." "Then you're letting the betrayal win," Angela said, her voice dropping. "You're letting what Mom did, what Jerome and Pastor Wright did, destroy what was real. The love was real, Daddy. Our family was real." For the first time since he'd opened that DNA report, Marcus felt his certainty waver. "Was it?" "Yes," Angela said fiercely. "I don't care what any test says. You're my father. You're the man who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up with me when I had nightmares, who walked me down the aisle. That's real. That matters." Marcus closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, he let himself feel the full weight of what he'd lost. Not because of the betrayal, but because of his response to it. "Angela," he whispered, "I don't know how to be your father anymore. I don't know how to look at you and not see the lie." "Then learn," she pleaded. "Fight for us the way you fought for this country. Fight for our family. Please, Daddy, don't let them destroy what we've built." Marcus sat in the gathering darkness, his daughter's pleas echoing in his ears, and wondered if redemption was possible for a man who'd already burned everything to the ground. Because the truth was, setting those legal wheels in motion, disowning his children, exposing Pastor Wright's secret, hadn't brought peace. It had only created more pain, spread the suffering wider. And now Marcus had to face the hardest question of all. Was he seeking justice, or just making sure everyone hurt as much as he did? The answer terrified him. 6 months later, the Bennett family remained fractured but not broken. Marcus had withdrawn the legal documents after a long conversation with Angela, a conversation that lasted through the night and left both of them exhausted, but somehow lighter. The healing was slow, imperfect. Malcolm still struggled to look at Jerome without feeling anger. Victoria had cautiously begun building a relationship with her half-sisters, though it was awkward and painful. Isaiah continued therapy, learning to make peace with the unknowing. And Marcus? He was learning that fatherhood, real fatherhood, wasn't about biology. It was about choice, the choice to love, to stay, to keep trying even when everything was broken. The DNA test had revealed the truth, but it had taken months of pain and nearly losing everything for the Bennetts to discover a deeper truth. That family, real family, is built not on blood but on the daily decision to be there for each other. It wasn't a happy ending. The scars remained. The betrayals couldn't be erased. But it was an honest ending, and in honesty, they found something that had been missing all along, the real foundation on which to rebuild. If this story moved you, If it made you think about what really makes a family, then you found your place here at the Witness Wall, where every story, no matter how painful, deserves to be witnessed. Hit that subscribe button, because the stories we tell here aren't just about crime. They're about the complicated truth of being human. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, remember, truth may hurt, but it's the only foundation worth building on.
Thanks for tuning in to The Witness Wall. If you're new to this channel, kindly like and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.